Peggy Johnson, thank you so much for sitting down with Forbes.
Thank you so much for having me, Maggie.
You are the CEO of Agility Robotics. You sit at the helm of an industry that Goldman Sachs expects to generate $38 billion by 2035. That is a lot of money. Tell us, what is Agility Robotics? What do you do?
Agility Robotics is a humanoid robot company. So it's a robot that stands as tall as a person. It has arms and legs and a head, and it can operate in environments that humans operate in.
So what are those environments? Where, and it's called Digit, correct?
Digit is the name of the robot, and there's a lot of places in our worlds that were built for humans. So shelves are only a certain height, as tall as humans can reach, or as low as humans can reach. Aisles down a corridor are a certain width for humans to walk down. And so there are tasks in those environments that Digit can step in and operate in, where other perhaps types of robots might not be viable in those areas. They might be too big, or they can't reach high enough up. So that's what makes humanoid robots purpose-built for those situations.
So what you're describing sounds like warehouses, factories, manufacturing. Is that the primary sector in which you're operating?
Today it is. Those are the areas that first have a big demand for labor. It's hard to fill these kinds of jobs. And already they have quite a bit of automation in those big warehouses, but they tend to be islands of automation. So you'll find a conveyor belt bringing product along. The product then needs to be picked up by a human and set over onto perhaps an autonomous robot that zips it down a corridor. And so those are the areas where humanoid robots can step in and take over some of these very repetitive tasks that humans are still doing today. So it'll be the connector between these islands of automation.
Interesting. What other applications are there for Digit and for Agility's products?
So Digit is a multi-purpose robot. And although we're starting in the logistics area because the demand is so high there, Digit can learn new skills. It can operate in the healthcare industry, retail, transportation. There's a whole world out there. But we're starting where the demand is highest and where we have the current feature set that can meet that demand. But AI now will be able to help us teach Digit new skills very quickly to move into these other markets.
Oh, I have so many follow-up questions. Let's start with healthcare, because we hear so much about the shortages of doctors and nurses and the burnout rates. Are robots going to be my primary care practitioner soon?
I think you'll never take a human out of the loop, but you can really see a robot coming in and maybe just doing some of the task work that happens inside of an operating room or inside of a doctor's office, just bringing instruments to the doctor, not perhaps doing everything the doctor does. And certainly there's an empathy side that you want to keep in the loop. But a lot of the other tasks that nurses and other healthcare personnel find to be a bit of a drudgery part of their job, you can see a robot stepping in and taking that, leaving the human to do the part of the job that they really enjoy most.
Which hopefully is talking to people in
Exactly.
a better way than a robot would. Now, you mentioned demand, and I'm really curious, what does demand for Digit from corporations tell you about the state of the economy and the general supply of labor in this country?
Well, we're in a tough situation because these jobs in the logistics area alone there's over 1 million jobs that are going unfilled. So we can't find people right now to step into these jobs. And that number has been accelerating. It was about 600,000 just a few years back. Part of what's going on in the logistics area is we all love our next day delivery or 2-day delivery. And that puts a heavy burden on these logistics facilities to turn product around quickly and get it shipped out the door. And so the more that becomes an expectation for each of us, the more of a burden it comes onto that logistics facility to find somebody to step into those roles. So in that area alone, the demand is great and growing. And you can see very much a replication of that across other industries. So right now, when you look across industries, it's almost uncapped, the need for some device to step in and take over these sorts of jobs.
Because the people just aren't filling those jobs.
Right, and you really can think of these as tasks. You know, they're parts of jobs that somebody has to do for a certain amount of their 8-hour shift. And I almost don't even want to call it a job because it's just something that has to get done. You want to free people up to learn new features and new skills inside these facilities, to become perhaps the manager of the fleet of robots, giving that person a digital job that they never would have had access to before if all they did was the physical part of the job. So it's really trading cycles, giving the dull, repetitive, sometimes injury-prone jobs or tasks to the robot, and giving the job or the career to the person who's managing the robot.
So it sounds like for folks who might be afraid that a robot will take their job, your answer is no, it just might change your job.
Right, and it will change out the parts of your job that you didn't love and allow you to focus on moving up in your career, learning new skills, showing more of your creative side. So those, hopefully we can take off the dull jobs, the dull tasks, give those to the robot and allow the human worker to bloom.
I feel like robots and humanoid robots sound like sci-fi, which is where a lot of those consumer concerns come from. What do you think the other big misunderstandings are?
Yeah, we've all seen those sci-fi movies, and so we have to overcome a bit of that. I think the biggest misunderstanding is that robots are going to take jobs. They're not. They're going to take tasks. They're going to take those parts of your daily job that you didn't want to do, that are not very exciting. They might be physically challenging. That's what we can have the robot do, and leave the human worker to learn new skills, to actually have a career versus just a set of tasks that they're completing throughout the day. And these jobs, there's so many that are going unfilled anyway. It makes sense to put a humanoid robot into these spots.
Now, Agility has 2 lines of business that helps drive revenue. What are those business lines?
So we have the physical robot itself, and we also have a layer of software that sits on top of the robot. And both of those will continue to evolve and expand. But over time, you can think of that layer of software as actually moving into almost an app store, just like we have on our phone. So you can come in and very quickly get a company up and running on some of the existing applications that sit on the software layer per whatever need they have in their facility.
Now, speaking of making money, Agility is revenue generating. It's an early stage startup, but you are generating revenue.
We do have revenue, yes.
And you have an announcement related to this, I believe.
We do. We have just stepped in to become the first humanoid to be commercially deployed. We are on the warehouse floor of a company called GXO, a third-party logistics provider just outside of Atlanta, and we are moving product for them. We are taking shift work, and the line it just moves along, and Digit has stepped in and is moving product for them in those areas that I talked about, the islands of automation. It's connecting those 2 areas.
Interesting, and this is the first application of a humanoid in this way.
The very first, yes. So we have put Digit to work.
And that's quite quick. You took the helm of this company just in March.
In March, right. So the company was on a good trajectory already, and we're just narrowing the focus to some initial use cases that we can concentrate on where the need is greater, but we will continue to add to those use cases over time.
What else is part of your mandate as new CEO of Agility?
Well, we want to make sure that we understand a customer's problem and we bring to them the solution that can solve for that. So we do have areas where people just want to innovate and see what the robot can do. We are very much focused on putting the robot to work. So we want to make sure that with Digit's current set of skills, that we put the robot to work solving a problem that has a need today, because that's very possible. It's not a futuristic thing. Digit can work today. So that's what I'm focused on. And if we don't find that when we're talking to a customer, because we don't have the skill set yet, we move on because the demand is so great just in that area.
And you price the humanoids comparable to a human worker, less than a human worker? How do you structure that?
Yeah, so when we come in and talk to companies, generally they're looking for an ROI of under 2 years, and we can meet that for compared to a human salary and the full comp package that surrounds putting a human to work for that same period of time.
So after 2 years, then the robot becomes cheaper.
Correct.
So that does seem a little risky for human workers, but you still think it's the task that is being taken and people aren't going to lose their jobs over this.
Right. It's a job that can't be filled to start with.
I see.
And so we're going to stay focused on that because that's where the need is near term. Longer term, we are a multi-purpose robot and we can go off into other directions to augment the human workers and not to replace them.
Well, you mentioned transportation, and the first time I heard you say that, I thought, like, oh, high-speed rail, will this make it faster? Selfishly, I think that's what I want to see. But
I love that idea. We'll start thinking about it.
There you go. Add it to your to-do list.
Yes.
While we're talking about the technology and trust, I am curious. There are so many deepfake videos on the internet today, and a lot of deepfakes can surround robotics. I could be watching a video of a robot doing something on my computer that it is not actually doing in real life. So how do you think about instilling trust in consumers and the business community when you put out videos of Digit and other Agility products?
We are very pragmatic in our videos, and we show what Digit can do today. And I think the real proof point is now stepping in to a customer and providing value, providing hours to that customer to put on their factory floor and do real work. That's the proof point right there. We're not about making fancy videos and showing what the robot can do in the future. We're about what the robot can do today.
You sit in such an interesting seat today, but you have also had a really fascinating journey to get to where you are today. And that journey starts with being a sibling in a very large family. Can you tell me, how many siblings do you have?
I have 14 brothers and sisters, so I'm one of 15.
You're one of 15.
Yes.
I'm going somewhere with this. What does being one of 15 do for your leadership abilities? Do you think you are a CEO because you grew up in such a large family?
I do. And being the second to the youngest, I wasn't the youngest. I didn't get all the attention. I was just one of the middle ones, what was it? Jan Brady from the Brady Bunch. I was somewhere in the middle. So not the oldest, not the youngest, but being nearer to the bottom, the lower ages, I was a big listener, and it was hard anyway to get a word in edgewise, as you might imagine, at our family dinner table. And so I became a listener. And that, I think, has been one of the areas that I was able to leverage in my management roles over the years and then my CEO roles.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I'm sure many personalities too. You learn how to juggle the family dinner table in the same way you learn how to juggle the C-suite meeting or the board meeting.
Yeah, we had one of every kind. So it's definitely understanding personalities, understanding the other person's point of view. That's always helped me in negotiations. And it all started, I think, going back to that dinner table.
That's amazing. And then you went to college as a business major, but you eventually changed to engineering. Why?
Well, I loved math and science, and I was asked about what I wanted to be in high school, and I thought, well, my older brothers and sisters went into business. I guess I'll go into business. No one ever, during all of my high school years, mentioned the words engineer to me. Ever. Never thought it was a good fit. And yet I loved all of the sciences. I loved, we had a high school where we took calculus in high school. I think I took 2 years of calculus in high school. It was a great public school from up near Los Angeles area. But why that wasn't presented to me, I think it was because, women generally didn't go into the engineering field, so it wasn't even considered an option. And so I went off to San Diego State, and I was a business major, and I had a job on campus because I was putting myself through college. And walked into the engineering department one day to deliver mail, and the two administrative assistants behind the desk thought I was there to learn about engineering, to ask about getting a degree in engineering. And I said, nope, just here to deliver the mail. And they said, well, do you know anything about engineering? And I said, I really don't. I had no idea what an engineer did in their profession. And so they sat me down and walked me all through the different types of engineering that I could go into. And then at the end of the conversation, they pushed the papers across the table to change my major. So that night I filled it out, came in the next day, became an engineering major.
Became an engineering major and then got a job in engineering in the 1980s. What was it like as a young woman in your first job?
There weren't very many women, definitely, in my first job, but oddly, I had a female manager, which I am so thankful for. And she instilled so much confidence in the women on her team. She really bolstered us in a kind of a tough environment. Being oftentimes we were the only, singly, we were the only women in a room of men. And she, walked us through strategies to have your voice being heard. And that really kept me engaged and in the field when so many of my fellow graduates were gone from the field after about the first 5 years. I would check back in with them and they said, well, it just wasn't quite right for me, and they moved on. But she was a real, just such a role model, and kept me in place through those early, more challenging years.
It's a real example of you have to see it to believe it and to be it.
Exactly. And as she was there and I looked up at her and I thought, I can do that.
What have you taken from her or from other mentors in your career that you're bringing with you into agility and your more recent roles?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway, my biggest learning of my entire career was just to be myself. Because as I went on to my next job and did not have a female manager at my next job, I was oftentimes criticized during performance reviews for not speaking up enough, for not talking enough in meetings. And it became a detriment to my upward mobility in these companies. And I thought, well, but I'm a good team builder. I fit in well in these environments. My work product was good. So this is what's holding me back. Maybe I need to leave too. And then I thought, well, no, maybe I'll try and be that person they want me to be. I tried to be louder in meetings, and one day I even hit my hand on the table and said, I want to speak, and everybody looked at me startled and said, what's wrong with Peggy? Because I wasn't myself, for sure. And then my manager said, you know what, you just be yourself and that will carry you through. And he was right. That actually gave me the confidence to be the introvert that I was. And I did communicate, but not always in a big meeting. I would go to someone's office, or I'd call them or send an email. And that was my form of communication. So although it wasn't the same as perhaps the others in the room, I was communicating, I was getting my point across. And he helped others recognize that. And I'm very grateful for that.
How have you identified the opportunities in your career? You said just now that you felt like your personality was a detriment, and then you found ways to overcome that. But then how have you identified the opportunities that help take your career to the next levels and to get to where you are now?
Well, I had a manager early on. I was in engineering, and I used to raise my hand when they needed an engineer to go out to customer sites and explain what our product did. I really enjoyed that. And he said, you have an antenna for people. You're a good listener. I've seen you in action. You should think about doing something different, maybe going into sales. And I thought, oh no, I can't go into sales. I'm an engineer. I'm not a salesperson. The engineers always used to make fun of the salespeople too. So that was something I was never going to do. But he kept pushing and said, you just need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And you have that little knot of worry in your stomach, and you think, can I do this? Can I do this? And a couple months went by, and I went back to him and I said, I think I'm ready to try that. And I moved over into the sales area, and I learned a new skill. And then from there, I moved over into the product area, and I learned a new skill. But each time I made that transition, I felt that little knot of worry. Can I really do this? You know, the imposter syndrome. I don't think I'm able to. But I had some very, very, very supportive managers along the way who kept me moving. And it was that aggregate of experience that got me to where I am today.
I generally don't like to ask women, what's it like now as a woman in robotics? But there are so few female CEOs who sit in seats like yours. So I won't ask what it's like now, but I will ask, how is the industry doing? Has it changed enough from when you were an early employee?
It has changed, for sure, and I celebrate that. I celebrate that because I have a daughter who's coming up, and I want to ensure that the world for her is different than the world for me. So we have made progress, and that has been good because now we have more women as role models to look up to. Younger women can see that more and more. Definitely more to do, of course, but it does feel very different. It feels more inclusive. By the way, not just of women, inclusive of everybody. Mm-hmm. And actually the management team that I inherited when I stepped in at Agility is wildly diverse in a tech field. There's several women. There's different ethnic groups. We have my CMO is part of the LGBTQ community, but they were the right person for the job. And that has built the company into what it is today. We have a working robot. We have the capability of showing that we can help humans with these repetitive, dull tasks that they have to do. It was that team, it was those different voices all speaking together and rowing in the same direction that got to the company. So it's proof that having that kind of diversity of thought is very valuable for companies.
So you say they were the best people for the job, these folks on your team who represent diverse communities. Yet it's also very good for business. Yet it's also something that's under fire right now in different parts of the country, in different political circles. What responsibility do you feel now in your current role to serve as an example? And did you think about this also when you were CEO of Magic Leap, which was working in augmented reality, which is another type of technology that can benefit from diversity?
Well, look, as a CEO, I have a responsibility to my shareholders to build revenue and to deliver revenue. And for me, I want to make a product that serves the broadest market. How do I do that? I have to hear from more people, not just one group. I think if I had a team full of Peggy Johnsons, I would build a product that I would love, but I wouldn't be able to sell it to most of the world. That's not being responsible as a CEO. So for me, I take that very seriously. I want to understand everything that can go into a product that can open my market as wide as possible so I can deliver that revenue for my shareholders.
You were saying you had a story that came to mind?
Yeah, back in the early days of Qualcomm, we actually built mobile phones. I don't know if you remember that, but there was a period of time that Qualcomm built mobile phones. And I remember we built one of the first smartphones, and it had some early data capabilities, but it was very, very big. And the engineers were so proud of it. And the first time I saw it, they handed it to me. It was huge and heavy. And I said, where do I carry this? And they said, well, you just put it in your pocket. Well, I didn't have a pocket big enough for that. And then they said, well, then you put it in your purse. And I thought, well, what use is it in my purse? It's just too big. But most of my comments were ignored, and off we went with a very big device, and we sold it to mostly men. I think it was 80% men was the market at the time. And if we had just had a few other voices saying, hey, maybe one of the priorities should be to make it a bit smaller, so at least it's manageable for smaller people, which
smaller
I was
people
one.
And people who often wear clothing that don't have pockets.
Doesn't have pockets, exactly. So I always think, even today, maybe the mobile phone would look different if we had had more women back then, because even today, oftentimes women put their mobile phone in their purse, though there are more and more women's clothes with pockets now. Even wedding dresses I've seen that have pockets.
I think that's one thing people of all political opinions can agree on. Pockets in dresses and skirts are a really good thing.
Are really good, I agree.
Okay, so we have a few questions that we ask everyone on the 50 over 50, and I want to ask them to you now. Is being over 50 an advantage or disadvantage in your current line of work?
Absolutely an advantage, because I have this plethora of experiences that one has built on the other, that's built on the other through several companies. And I couldn't have done that in a compacted amount of time. I had to live, by the way, through the highs and lows of different projects and different companies' cycles. All of that is cumulative to the experience I bring today in my current role. So it's absolutely an advantage, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Now, before we started rolling, we were talking about running.
Yes.
You are a runner. You've recently completed the Tokyo Marathon. Tell me what you learned running this marathon, because I think it's a running lesson, but it's also a life lesson.
Well, it's interesting. I have been working on and just completed in Tokyo the Abbott World Majors. So these are the largest marathons around the world. There's a set of 6 of them, and Tokyo was the last one. And I would say with the first 5, I was always thinking about my time. What is my time going to be? And I have to, try and go faster. And it's a burden to feel that all through the marathon. And I decided with this marathon, my last, I just wanted to enjoy it. And I wanted to look at the sights of Tokyo and take in the crowds and the noise and the splendor of it all. And that's what I did. And I remember thinking, usually in the 20s, mile 21 and above, things aren't pleasant. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Like, I was enjoying it. I crossed the line and I thought, I could keep going. That is the first time that's ever happened. But it really taught me that, I think that was the more important way to go, to enjoy it in the moment. And that's what I did in Tokyo.
Well, maybe an ultra's in your future if you felt like you could keep going.
Possibly. The thought crossed my mind that day. Possibly.
Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of the future, what's next for you? What's next for you as a person, and what's next for you as the CEO of Agility?
Well, right now we are heads down working on our next generation product, expanding use cases, teaching agility or teaching Digit new skills. So that's my near-term focus, and I will continue to do that. Longer term, I would love to do something in the political arena. I know it's crazy. It sounds crazy right now, given the current environment, but that is a goal of mine that I've held, and someday I think I'll head that direction. I'd rather be appointed. I don't know. Running seems very challenging. So that's the future.
So future ambassador, maybe.
That would be great.
All right, you heard it here first. You're going to have to come back and sit down with us when you get that role.
Okay, I'll definitely do that.
Peggy Johnson, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for having me.